Hey guys, welcome back to another impressions video. This time around to talk about Luigi's Mansion, a replay of a game that I enjoyed a lot back in the day. I actually never owned the original game for the Nintendo Gamecube, but I did borrow it from a friend of mine when I was in school, and I took that weekend. I remember a weekend because the game was very short. I did it in 2 days, and I remember having a lot of fond memories and having fun with the game. So I was very excited when Nintendo announced the basically port of the GameCube game into the Nintendo 3DS, because I think it served well in the sense that the Nintendo 3DS, it's already an aging system, and you know, the release of any game just helps prolong the life cycle of the system. So I was very excited when this somewhat enhanced port, and there are some things that are new, got announced, and you know, I had to get it because I don't have the original in my GameCube collection, so it was a perfect chance to add Luigi's Mansion to my collection. And of course, if you guys followed my channel a couple of years ago, I did do an impressions video on the Nintendo 3DS exclusive title Dark Moon, which is basically a sequel to Luigi's Mansion, a game that I really enjoyed, a game that is more polished. And that's one of the things that you have to keep in mind when you play the original Luigi's Mansion, is that it's a game from 2002, 2003. A lot of the mechanics are very old. It's you know, the presentation has its own little quirks, if you will, being an older GameCube game, a launch day title, which back in the day was a little bit of a shocking experience, because you know, the tradition was broken. You know, having a Nintendo system launch without a Mario game was a pretty big deal back then. Now Luigi was the main protagonist, and on top of that, it deviated from the platforming formula. This is more of an adventure game where you explore, you know, in this case the mansion, and you know, that was a little bit of a shocking experience, not having a traditional Mario game, not having a traditional platforming game at launch for the Nintendo GameCube. And I think Nintendo got a lot of flack for doing that. But you know, in hindsight, I'm kind of glad they did, because we received this new series, because now we have Luigi's Mansion, we have Dark Moon, and the upcoming Nintendo Switch title, which is looking to be another fun game, and it's looking great graphically. So I'm kind of glad Nintendo deviated from their own traditional formulas to offer a more, I guess, a refreshing experience, despite a lot of complaints, you know, back in the day from reviewers and fans alike. But Luigi's Mansion, it's a fun game. Again, not as polished as Dark Moon, not as I guess meaty as the Dark Moon game, in the sense that the sequel here has, I believe, 5 different mansions that you can explore, whereas the original one, there's only one. And the premise of the game is pretty funny and simple. Basically, Luigi receives a letter saying that he inherited a mansion, and so when he goes, obviously, to claim the new house or the new mansion, he finds out that, you know, his older brother or his brother Mario got abducted. He's missing, and with the help of Professor Egad, which is kind of like a new character that was introduced in that game, with the help of him, Luigi is able to explore the mansion, because Professor Egad developed this, I guess, ghost trapping machine, you know, the Poltergust 3000, which is basically a vacuum that you can use to vacuum ghosts, in conjunction with a flashlight. You know, you flash the light on the ghosts, they get stunned for a second, and then you can suck them up with your vacuum. So different enemy types that require different tactics. Sometimes you have to sneak behind the ghosts. Sometimes they have different hit points that you have to target. And this game also has the elements, which is basically you can have an ice element added to your vacuum, or fire element, or water element. And it's a little bit annoying in the sense that it's good to have a variety, but in order to use the different elements to solve puzzles or to defeat certain enemies, you have to go to a specific source. You can't just switch back and forth through the elements. For example, if you need fire, you need to go to let's say a candle in a certain room of the mansion. If you need ice, you may have to go to like the kitchen area where there's a refrigerator, and you can get the ice element on your Poltergust 3000. So that kind of goes hand in hand with the overall gameplay of the game, which requires a lot of backtracking. Again, it's an adventure game, but this being a GameCube game, you can tell there are some, I don't want to use the word archaic elements, but older elements that are typical of a early 2000 game, and especially one where Nintendo was doing a lot of things for the first time. Graphically, the game, in my opinion, doesn't have any improvements over the original that I can recall. Obviously, I don't have that game on the GameCube, and it's been a while since I played it, but it's very disappointing that on the 3DS, this game does not feature any 3D effects. You can have your Nintendo 3DS turned on as far as the 3D slider, and there won't be any differences. So, a little bit disappointing that Nintendo did not spend the time to do that. But nevertheless, the game looks good. Looks just like the GameCube version, in my opinion. And of course, you have one of the big surprises or features of the game back in the day was the fact of the facial expressions of Luigi. Back then, before that, you had Super Mario 64 on the Nintendo 64, where the faces were very blocky, obviously lacking a lot of detail. And then with the power of the Nintendo GameCube, Nintendo was able to do a lot of animations, with the body of Luigi, the character models, the faces, the expression on the eyes when Luigi's scared, or the body itself, a lot of animations when he's scared of the ghost, when he's running away from the ghost, fighting mechanics and whatnot. You can really tell that was a huge step forward for Nintendo. But nowadays it doesn't look very impressive when compared to modern game mechanics. So it'll be a little bit of a hard experience if you haven't played the original one from the GameCube era. It'll be a little bit of a switch in terms of gameplay mechanics. It will feel dated, in my opinion, but again, it's an experience that I think it's worth exploring. Considering it's a short game, it's not going to take you a while. I think the game can take anywhere between 5 to 7 hours, depending on the amount of collecting and discovering the secrets. There's some certain collectibles that you can do in the game that are not very hard to obtain, to be completely honest, but nevertheless they're there if you're a completionist. But overall, it's not a very long game, and it doesn't really offer a ton of replay value, although the Nintendo 3DS version does have like a new co-op mode that I haven't really tried it, but it's a new addition when compared to the Nintendo GameCube one. And again, the gameplay, it's fairly simple. The Nintendo 3DS has some very annoying things that I was able to overcome. The analog stick on the new Nintendo 3DS, because I played that, it just simply sucks. The second one is just basically like a little analog stick, that it really sucks. So the controls, in my opinion, are better on the GameCube version. From what I remember, the Nintendo 3DS version can become very frustrating, but since the game is not overall a hard game per se, it doesn't really get in the way of you throwing your 3DS against the wall. But if this was a more challenging game, I could definitely see myself, because there were times where I was struggling with the controls just to defeat certain enemies, but overall I was able to overcome that. So negative points of this Nintendo 3DS ports are the lack of 3D effects, and I guess the controls are a little bit on the annoying side. But the positives are that Nintendo brought back this game. For me, it worked out perfectly because, again, I don't own the GameCube version, and I'm not in my collecting mode where I would spend money to get an older game that I like. I'm past that point in my collecting habits. Who knows? Maybe I'll go back at one point in the future, but I don't feel like spending a whole lot of money for these type of retro games, if you will. So I'm glad Nintendo released a new version, even though it's not overall enhanced. There are not a whole lot of enhancements. I was glad to be able to replay the game, especially with the upcoming Nintendo Switch game, the new Luigi's Mansion. I think it's a perfect time to kind of explore the two titles here that we have for the Nintendo 3DS for the Luigi's Mansion game. So the game also has amiibo functionality. It helps. It even helps you even more. The game is not hard, like I mentioned. But if you need extra help, you can use the different amiibos, like the Luigi amiibo, the Boo amiibo from the Super Mario series, and they will give you help, basically, more health or an extra continue when you die and things like that. So amiibo functionality is there if you own the amiibos, and I did try it, even though I didn't really need it. I was able to try it out using the amiibos, and it could be help. I think towards the end the game can be somewhat challenging, and especially the final boss with the controls. I think it can be frustrating. So maybe the amiibos, the amiibo help will help you guys out as far as defeating the game. But overall, I'm very pleased with this game. It's a short game. I'm glad I was able to put a green check on my 3DS backlog, and highly recommend it. If you guys have not played the original one, this is a good chance to do it, a good chance to try the sequel, and then of course jump into the new upcoming Nintendo Switch titles. So that's it for now. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all later.